Chapter 4. The park was about 2 blocks square, with a fountain in the middle and a small swimming pool for the little kids. The pool was empty now in the fall, but the fountain was going merrily. Tall trees made the park shadowy and dark, and it would have been a good hangout, but we preferred our vacant lot. The shepherd outfit liked the alleys down the tracks, so the park was left to lovers and little kids. Nobody was around at 2:30 in the morning, and it was a good place to relax and cool off. I couldn't have gotten much cooler without turning into a popsicle. Johnny snapped up his jean jacket and flipped up the collar. "Ain't you about to freeze to death, pony?" "You ain't a woofin'," I said, rubbing my bare arms between drags on my cigarettes. I started to say something about the film of ice developing on the outer edges of the fountain when a sudden blast from a car horn made us both jump. The blue Mustang was circling the park slowly. Johnny swore under his breath, and I muttered, What do they want? This is our territory. What are Soaks doing this far east?" Johnny shook his head. "I don't know, but I bet they're looking for us. We picked up the girls." "Oh, glory," I said with a groan. "This is all I need to top off a perfect night." I took one last drag on my weed, and the ground the stub under my heel. "Want to run for it?" "It's too late now," Johnny said. "Here they come." 5 Socias were coming straight at us, and from the way they were staggering, I figured were reeling pickled. That scared me. A cool, deadly bluff could sometimes shake them off, but not if they outnumbered you 5-1, 5-2, and were drunk. Johnny's hand went back to his pocket, and I remembered his switchblade. I wished for that broken bottle. I'd sure show them I could use it if I had to. Johnny was scared to death. I mean it. He was as white as a ghost, and his eyes were wild-looking, like the eyes of an animal in a trap. We backed against the fountain, and the Soaks surrounded us. They smelled so heavily of whiskey and English leather that I almost choked. I wished desperately that Derry and Soda would come along hunting for me. The 4 of us could handle them easily. But no one was around, and I knew Johnny and I were going to have to fight it out alone. Johnny had a blank, tough look on his face. You'd have to know him to see the panic in his eyes. I stared at the Soaks coolly. Maybe they could scare us to death, but we'd never let them have the satisfaction of knowing it. It was Randy and Bob and 3 other Socias, and they recognized us. I knew Johnny recognized them. He was watching the moonlight glint off Bob's rings with huge eyes. "Hey, what you doing?" "Hey, what do you know?" Bob said a little unsteadily. "Here's the little greasers that picked up our girls." "Hey, greaser, you're out of your territory," Johnny warned in a low voice. "You'd better watch it." Randy swore at us and then stepped in closer. Bob was eyeing Johnny. "Nup, pal, you're the ones who'd better watch it. Next time you want a brat, pick your own kind, dirt." I was getting mad. I was hating them enough to lose my head. "You know what a greaser is?" Bob asked. "White trash with long hair." I felt the blood draining down my face. I've been cussed out and sworn at, but nothing ever hit me like that did. Johnny Cake made a kind of gasp, and his eyes were smoldering. "You know what a Soaks is?" I said, my voice shaking with rage. "White trash with Mustangs and Madras." And then, because I couldn't think of anything bad enough to call them, I spit at them. Bob shook his head, smiling slowly. "You could use a bath, Gracer, and a good working over. And we've got all night to do it. Give the kid a bath, David." I ducked and tried to run for it, but the Socias caught my arm and twisted it behind my back and shoved my face into the fountain. I fought, but the hand at the back of my neck was strong, and I had to hold my breath. I'm dying, I thought, and wondered what was happening to Johnny. I couldn't hold my breath any longer. I fought against desperately, but only sucked in water. I'm drowning, I thought. They've gone too far. A red haze filled my mind, and I slowly relaxed. The next thing I knew, I was lying on the pavement beside the fountain, coughing water and gasping. I lay there weakly, breathing in air and spitting out water. The wind blasted through my soaked sweatshirt and dripping hair. My teeth chattered unceasingly, and I couldn't stop them. I finally pushed myself up and leaned back against the fountain, the water running down my face. Then I saw Johnny. He was sitting next to me, one elbow on his knee, and staring straight ahead. He was a strained greenish white, and his eyes were huger than I'd ever seen them. I killed him, he said slowly. I killed the boy. Bob, the handsome Soch, was lying there in the moonlight, doubled up and still. A dark pool was growing from him, spreading slowly over the blue-white cement. I looked at Johnny's hand. He was clutching his switchblade, and it was dark to the hilt. My stomach gave a violent jump, and my blood turned icy. Johnny, I managed to say, fighting the dizziness, I think I'm going to be sick. Go ahead, he said in the same steady voice. I won't look at you. I turned my head and was quietly sick for a minute. Then I leaned back and closed my eyes so I wouldn't see Bob lying there. This can't be happening. This can't be happening. This can't be... You really killed him, huh, Johnny? Yeah, his voice quavered slightly. I had to. They were drowning you, Pony. They might have killed you. And they had a blade. They were gonna beat me up. Like they did before? Johnny was quiet for a minute. Yeah, he said, like they did before. Johnny told me what had happened. They ran when I stabbed him. They all ran. A panic was rising in me as I listened to Johnny's quiet voice go on and on. Johnny, I nearly screamed. What are we gonna do? They put you in the electric chair for killing people. I was shaking. I want a cigarette. I want a cigarette. I want a cigarette. We had smoked our last pack. I'm scared, Johnny. What are we gonna do? Johnny jumped up and dragged me up by my sweatshirt. He shook me. Calm down, Pony. Get a hold of yourself. I hadn't realized I was screaming. I shook loose. Okay, I said. I'm okay now. Johnny looked around, slapping his pockets nervously. We gotta get out of here. Get somewhere. Run away. The police will be here soon. I was trembling, and it wasn't all from the cold. But Johnny, except for the fact that his hand was twitching, he looked as cool as Derry ever had. We'll need money, and maybe a gun, and a plan. Money, maybe a gun, a plan? Where in the world would we get these things? Dally, Johnny said with finality. Dally will get us out of here. I heaved a sigh. Why hadn't I thought of that? But I never thought of anything. Dallas Winston could do anything. Where can we find him? I think at Buck Merrill's place. There's a party over there tonight. Dally said something about it this afternoon, but Buck Merrill was Dally's rodeo partner. He was the one who got Dally the job as a jockey for the Slash J. Buck raised a few quarter horses and made most of his money on fixed races and a little bootlegging. I was under strict orders from both Derry and Soda not to get caught within 10 miles of his place, which was dandy to me. I didn't like Buck Merrill. He was a tall, lanky cowboy with blonde hair and buck teeth. Or he used to be buck tooth before he had the front two knocked out in a fight. He was out of it. He dug Hank Williams. How gross can you get? Buck answered the door when we knocked, and a roar of cheap music came within. The clinking of glasses, loud, rough laughter, female giggles, and Hank Williams. It scraped on my raw nerves like sandpaper. A can of beer in one hand, Buck glared down at us. What do you want? Dally, Johnny gulped, looking back over his shoulder. We gotta see Dally. He's busy, Buck snapped, and someone in his living room yelled, Aha! And then, Yeehaw! And then the sound of it almost made me nerves snap. Tell him it's Pony and Johnny, I commanded. I knew Buck, and the only way you could get anything from him was to bully him. I guess that's why Dally could handle him so easy, although Buck was in his mid-20s and Dally was 17. He'll come. Buck glared at me for a second, then stumbled off. He was pretty well croaked, which made me apprehensive. It was Dally, if Dally was drunk and in a dangerous mood. He appeared in a few minutes, clad only in a pair of low-cut blue jeans, scratching the hair on his chest. He was sober enough, and that surprised me. Maybe he hadn't been there long. Okay, kids, what do you need me for? As Johnny told him the story, I studied Dally, trying to figure out what there was about this tough-looking hood that a girl like Cherry Valance could love. Tow-headed and shifty eyes, Dallas was anything but handsome. Yet in his hard face there was character, pride, and a savage defiance of the world. He could never love Cherry Valance back. It would be a miracle if Dally loved anything. The fight for self-preservation had hardened him beyond caring. He didn't bat an eye when Johnny told him what had happened, only grinned and said, "Good for you," when Johnny told how he had knifed the Soaks. Finally, Johnny finished. "We figured you could get us out of here if anyone could. I'm sorry we've got you away from the party." "Oh, shoot, kid." Dally glanced contemptuously over his shoulder. "I was in the bedroom." He suddenly stared at me. "Glory, but your ears can get red, pony boy." I was remembering what usually went on in the bedroom at Buck's parties. Then Dally grinned in amused realization. "It wasn't anything like that, kid. I was asleep, or trying to be, with all this racket. Hank Williams." He rolled his eyes and added a few adjectives after Hank Williams. "Me and Shepard had a run-in, and I cracked some ribs. I just needed a place to lie over." He rubbed his side ruefully. "Old Tim Sue sure can put a pack punch. He won't be able to see out of one eye for a week." He looked us over and sighed. "Well, wait a sec, and I'll see what I could do about this mess." Then he took a good look at me. "Pony boy, are you wet?" "Yes," I stammered through chattering teeth. "Glory, hallelujah." He opened the screen door and pulled me in, motioning for Johnny to follow. "You'll die of pneumonia before the cops ever get you." He half dragged me into an empty bedroom, swearing at me all the way. "Get that sweatshirt off." He threw over a towel at me. "Dry off and wait here. At least Johnny's got his jeans jacket. You ought to know better than to run away in just a sweatshirt. And a wet one at that. Don't you ever use your head?" He sounded so much like Derry that I stared at him. He didn't notice and left us sitting on the bed. Johnny lay back in it. Wish I had me a weed. My knees were shaking as I finished drying off, sitting there in jeans. Dally appeared. He carefully shut the door. "Here." He handed us a gun and a roll of bills. "The gun's loaded. For Pete's sake, Johnny, don't point the thing at me. Here's $50. That's all I could get out of Merrill tonight. He's blowing his loot from that last race." You might have thought it was Dally who fixed those races for Buck, being a jockey and all, but it wasn't. The last guy to suggest it lost their teeth. It's the truth. Dally rode the ponies honestly and did his best to win. It was the only thing Dally did, honestly. "Pony, do Derry and Soda Pop know about this?" I shook my head. Dally sighed. "Boy, howdy, I ain't itching to be the one to tell Derry and get my head busted." "Then don't tell him," I said. I hated to worry Soda Pop, and would have liked to let him know I had gotten this far, okay? But I didn't care if Derry worried himself gray-headed. I was too tired to tell myself I was being mean and unreasonable. I convinced myself wouldn't be fair to make Dally tell him. Derry would beat him to death for giving us the money and the gun and getting us out of town. "Here." Dally handed me a shirt about 60 million sizes too big. "It's Buck's. You and him ain't exactly the same size, but it's dry." He handed me his worn brown leather jacket with the yellow sheep's wool lining. It'll get cold where you're going, but you can't risk being loaded down with blankets. I started up, buttoning up the shirt. It about swallowed me. Hop the 3:15 freight to Windricksville, Dally instructed. There's an old abandoned church on top of the J Mountain. There's a pump in the back, so don't worry about water. Buy a week's supply of food as soon as you get there. This morning, before the story gets out, and then don't so much as stick your noses out the door. I'll be up there as soon as I think it's clear. Man, I thought New York was the only place I could get 'em mixed up in a murder trap. And the word murder, Johnny made a small noise in his throat and shuddered. Dolly walked us back to the door, turning off the porch light. Get going. He messed up Johnny's hair. Take care, he said softly. Sure, thanks. And we ran into darkness. We crouched in the weeds beside the railroad tracks, listening to the whistles grow louder. The train slowed to a screeching halt. Now, whispering Johnny. We ran and pulled ourselves into an open box car. We pressed against the side, trying to hold out our last breaths while we listened to the railroad workers walk up and down the side. One poked his head inside, and we froze, but he didn't see us, and the box car rattled as the train started up. The first stop will be Windricksville, Johnny said, laying the gun down gingerly. He shook his head. I don't see why he gave me this. I couldn't shoot anybody. Then for the first time, really, I realized that we were in for. Johnny had killed someone. Quiet, soft-spoken little Johnny, who wouldn't hurt a living soul, had taken a human life. We were really running away, with the police after us for murder and a loaded gun by our side. I wish we asked Dolly for a pack of cigarettes. I stretched out and used Johnny's legs for a pillow. Curling up, I was thankful for Dolly's jacket. It was too big, but it was warm. Not even the rattling of the train could keep me awake, and I went to sleep in a hoodlum's jacket with a gun lying next to my hand. I was hardly awake when Johnny and I leaped off the train into a meadow. Not until I landed in the dew and got a wet shock did I realize what I was doing. Johnny must have woke me up and told me to jump, but I didn't remember it. We lay in the tall weeds and damp grass, breathing heavily. The dawn was coming. It was lightening the sky in the east, and a ray of gold touched the hills. The clouds were pink, and meadow larks were singing. This is the country, I thought, half asleep. My dreams come true, and I'm in the country. Blast it, pony boy. Johnny was rubbing his legs. You must have put my legs to sleep. I can't even stand up. I barely got off the train. I'm sorry. Why didn't you make me up? That's okay. I don't want to wake you up until I had to. Now, how do we find J Mountain? I asked Johnny. I was still groggy with sleep and wanted to sleep forever in the night there in the dew and dawn. Go ask someone. The story won't be in the paper yet. Make a little farm boy taking a walk or something. I don't like a little farm boy, I said. I suddenly thought of my long hair, combed back in the slouching stride I used from the habit. I looked at Johnny. He didn't look like any farm boy to me. He still reminded me of a lost puppy who had been kicked too often, but for the first time I saw him as a stranger might see him. He looked hard and tough because of his black t-shirt and his blue jeans and jacket. And because his hair was heavily greased and so long, I saw how his hair curled behind his ears, and I thought, we both need a haircut and some decent clothes.